I am fundamentally flawed as a human being. I've been single for 10 years, I live alone with my cat, and I often say or do the completely wrong thing. However, that doesn't stop hundreds of people asking me for advice. Now, asking someone for advice, or asking me for advice, someone who just 4 years ago was still living with his mum and was completely skint, seems pretty illogical, right? However, there is some sense in it. So over the last 4 years, I've managed to build a business from 0 to 150 employees, and now we create content that gets viewed over 100 million times every single day. So I kind of do understand when people ask me for advice on how to make a viral video or how to build a brand on social. But when I have young, aspiring entrepreneurs coming to me and asking for generic business advice, I don't really see the sense in it. See, this information age that we're now in has created this advice-ridden society where everyone is wanting to dish it out. Every influencer, every book, every podcast, every YouTube video is people convincing you that they have the solution to your problem. And on the other side, you've got everyone looking for the answers, on how to be successful, how to build a business, or how to be happier. Now, a byproduct of this information and this advice-ridden society is that people have slowly convinced themselves that they are ill-equipped to deal with their own problems. Instead of looking for the answers within themselves, they are out there searching for the answers. And the problem is that all these podcasts and all these books and all these YouTube videos, they haven't actually improved the success rates of startups. 50% of startups fail in the very first 4 years. And despite all this information, that number has not changed because running a business running a startup is hard, and running a successful startup is even harder. So what do you actually listen to when you want to build a successful business? My entrepreneurial journey started when I was about 13 years old, selling bits and bobs on eBay, mainly my Christmas presents. Please do not tell my mum. It's been 15 years since then, and I can definitely tell you that I have failed a whole load more than I've succeeded. And along that journey, I've been given a whole load of advice, some of which I've taken on board, but the majority of which I've completely ignored. Despite my mum advising me that I shouldn't even go to university, I did, and I think I became a much more rounded individual as a result, and I actually met a bunch of people who played a key role in my success down the line. Despite teachers advising me that I should study law because that's where I showed promise, I didn't. I studied business, my passion, and that was the best decision I ever made. And despite so many successful entrepreneurs telling me that building a business off of social media was neither profitable nor sustainable, well, thank God I ignored them. See, if I'd taken that advice a bit more seriously, my life would have panned out very differently. And the problem that I've found throughout the years is that advice really just lacks one key thing, and that thing is context. And when I say context, it can be broken down into two things. First is resources. What is that person's assets? How much money do they have? Who do they know? What team do they have around them? What location are they in? And secondly is timing. What's the state of the financial market? What is the state of the industry that they're about to enter? And if you're taking advice from someone who was successful 30 years ago when there were no phones, no social media, and no shared economy, then maybe that advice is a bit outdated. Now, I think that when either giving or receiving advice, this stuff is completely ignored. No thinking of the context, no thinking of the resources or the timing. So what advice, again, should you listen to? So I'm going to take you through a few key problems that we've all faced and will continue to face in our lives, especially as an aspiring entrepreneur, and see what kind of advice is out there, So the first one is work-life balance. Do you work into the early hours of the morning? Do you work in the weekends? Should you have a social life, or should you be committing wholeheartedly to work? So I looked at, some advice that's out there online. And first of all, from the YouTube CEO, Susan Wojcicki, she says that success is not based on the number of hours that you've worked. If you're working 24/7, you're not going to have any interesting ideas. So this suggests, great, step outside of work life, that's when you'll have the best ideas, then you can bring that to work and be more productive. However, Elon Musk, obviously a very famous person we know, when asked how much time employees need to put in to make a real impact, he said about 80 sustained, peaking above 100 at times. Now bear in mind he's talking about number of hours per week. So that's pretty much advising, if you're not sleeping, then you should definitely be working, and work-life balance shouldn't really exist. So who do you listen to? Next, you've got working with friends. So my logic is that, if you've known someone for 15 or 20 years, it's kind of like a 15 or 20-year interview. You know what they're good at, you know what they're bad at, you know what makes them tick, you know they'll be loyal, and you're probably going to have a lot of fun with them as well. And Alex Chung, the CEO of Giphy, he agrees. He said, work with your friends if you get the chance, suggesting that not only is it fun, it's probably good for business. But then if you delve deeper, you will see that a lot of people venomously disagree with myself and Alex. And this quote, for example, from Peter Lasafire says, hiring friends is a lose-lose situation. Oftentimes, the day you hire one of your pals will also turn out to be the day that you're no longer friends. So if you're building a business and you're thinking about employing some of your friends, which one do you listen to? And then there's prioritization. Now, I'm definitely not the only person in this room who has a considerable to-do list that's constantly growing with some short-term goals, long-term goals, and it's tough to figure out what to prioritize. How do you best utilize the hours in your day? So I took I looked at some advice from one of the most successful people in the world, Mark Zuckerberg, and he said, I think there's a simple rule of businesses. If you do the things that are easier first, then you can actually make a lot of progress. This is great news for all of us. I mean, focus on the easy stuff, not the hard bits, not the big ideas, and that easy stuff will gradually, progress you and you'll move forward in the best way. However, his colleague, his very close colleague, Sheryl Sandberg, said something very, very conflicting. And she said, what we talk about is ruthless prioritization. And by that, what we mean is only ever do the best ideas. I'm not sure about you guys, but my best ideas are definitely the hardest and the longest. And if I took Mark's advice, I would definitely be pushing those to the very back or the end of the to-do list. So if you're looking to prioritize, who do you listen to? Now, with all these pieces of advice, the key thing is that it's not bullshit. What they're saying isn't bullshit, but I think what is bullshit is when people take it for gospel and apply it blindly to their situation. These are merely people's opinions saying what worked for them. So what's the solution? Well, my advice to you is, I'm of course joking, I'm not here to give anyone advice, but what I will say is two things that I've done over the last few years around the area of advice. So the first thing is that I've fundamentally changed how I receive advice. So I can't escape from advice. You guys can't escape from advice. Advice is everywhere, from your friends to your family to your colleagues to social media. You can't avoid it, but what you can control is how you receive advice. So I used to receive it with optimism, thinking that this person that was about to say something to this super successful entrepreneur, this person I respect so much, was about to give the solution to my problems. But over time, I kind of found that I was being treated a bit like a pinball, being flung around this machine with no control over my own destiny. And ultimately, what they were telling me wasn't actually helping solve my problems. So now, instead of receiving it with optimism, I just receive it like it's a story. Like instead of them telling me what to do, they're just telling me about an experience they've had and a lesson they've learned, and I'm just there to simply enjoy it. And off the back of this change, I found that instead of being this kind of anxious and pretty much self-absorbed mess, always looking for the answers to my own problem, instead I was actually listening to stories and enjoying them and actually learning a lot more without applying it to the situation that I was in at that point in time. And the second thing I've tried to do is to stop giving people advice. Now, hopefully, you guys will realize that I'm just trying to talk about my experiences and the lessons that I've learned. This hasn't always been the way, because giving advice is kind of like a knee-jerk reaction. You feel like you should be doing it. You know, when I first started getting a bit of success a couple of years ago and people would ask me for advice, I thought that was what I should do. That was my responsibility, to show them how to be successful, to guide them down the path to glory, despite me not knowing anything about them. So I gave them advice, and trust me, it wasn't the horrendous advice you see on social media, on YouTube or on LinkedIn, saying, quit your job, drop out of university, work 23 hours and sleep 1. I wasn't doing that. But I was giving my own form of advice, despite me knowing nothing about them. And over the years, I've followed up with these people to get feedback on how my advice changed their lives. And the feedback that I got was pretty negative. And it was negative for a few reasons. And I learned a few things. And the first thing, and the most worrying thing that I learned, was that my advice could actually be really dangerous. If I kind of advise someone to do something and they listen kind of blindly and they do it, I could actually push them down a path that's completely wrong for them, because I have no idea what path I should be pushing them down because I don't know enough about them. So my advice could be dangerous. And the second one is that I just learned I would never have enough context to give good advice to anyone I know, let alone someone I've only just met or someone I've just met over email. So the third thing, actually, there was a third thing, is that I was just really shit at giving advice. So I just needed to stop. Now, ultimately, I am just the same as every other entrepreneur, whether they're at the start or whether they're hugely successful. Just trying to carve out a successful journey by using what's important. And for me, that's the information in front of me and the people around me. And actually, the one piece of advice that I've used over the years isn't a piece of advice that's going to sell loads of books or get a bunch of subscribers on YouTube, but it's about finding balance. Because it's about finding balance between the two extremes, because advice are extremes. They're saying either do this or don't do that, when ultimately you just need to find a balance between the two. And the only person that can find the balance is yourself. So now, instead of running down the rabbit hole, searching for advice, seeking out a bunch of information, I just try and cut off from the noise. There was a recent study from Stanford University which proved that the simple act of walking improved creativity by over 60%. So now when I face troubles in my business, I don't look for a book, I don't try and put on a podcast, I shut it all away and I go for a nice little stroll. Now, don't worry, the irony of this is not lost on me. Hopefully you guys don't just think this is me giving you advice about why you shouldn't be taking advice. This is purely just for your entertainment. And if you can take anything from what I've learned or what I've said today and apply it to your context, then that's brilliant. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the story. Thank you.